Hi, everybody. It's Laura, and welcome to the class of 74. We had a slight techno failure last week after only 8 minutes of episode 5 being uploaded, resulting in the necessity to call the complete episode number 6 in order to get it to you. But you guys figured it all out far sooner than I did. And I thank you for sticking with it, for sticking with me, and for sticking with all of us, because we are now traveling through time as a very large group, which is fun. Hopefully, you're like me and can forget all the nonsense going on in this world while visiting all the nonsense that went on in the world 50 years ago, and that somehow, by doing that, I can return to my life each week with a new sense of gratitude for my life, for all the people I love and have loved, whether they are right here, right now, or just on the other side in the next phase of being. We still see you guys. In the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, shall we find out why, once again, Cynthia Schuyler has been summoned to the administrative offices at Brighton High again? Episode 7. People Are Strange. Hi, Mrs. Marsh. Dr. Mullen only has a minute to speak with you, Cynthia. Leave your books here and go right in. Cheerleading tryouts are today at 3 o'clock in the gym, Mr. Wolfgang Zollner was reading into his microphone. Cynthia knocked on the principal's door and cracked it open. Dr. Mullen, Mrs. Marsh said I was to come straight in. Yes, come in. Please close the door behind you. The principal was standing by the window, smoking another one of those tiny cigars. To the left of Cynthia, a man in a dark blue suit stood up. This is Detective Fiducia, Cynthia. She met the detective halfway to shake hands. His hand was dry and firm, the way her dad said a handshake should be. He smiled. Nice to meet you, Cynthia. She smiled. Detective Fiducia is investigating yesterday's incident. We just hung up with Dr. Whitaker, who said you're aware of what the situation is with Mr. Wronski. More specifically, what may have led to his violent outburst. She nodded. This is important, Cynthia. Have you discussed any aspect of what happened yesterday with Ted Hamilton? I only asked him if he had heard about what Victor Wronski did. What did he say? The detective asked. He was irritated and he snapped at me. Of course I did. But then he apologized a second later and he said, there goes my best offensive guard. Detective Fiducia was scribbling on a pad in his hand. Did you tell him anything about yesterday? Yesterday night? She shook her head. No. Yesterday afternoon? No. You didn't share any of what Dr. Whitaker told you last night? No, sir. I mean, why would I? Well, why did you ask him if he heard about what Victor Wronski did? She could feel her face starting to burn. It was a good question. I guess I was curious what he would say about it. And what did he say? Well, a friend was standing there, and she asked, well, what did this guy do? And then I just wanted to get away because I felt very uncomfortable. So I told her Teddy could tell her about it while they were having coffee, because that's where they were going. The principal stamped out his cigar. Did this just happen? Yes, right after you went inside. Cynthia, the detective said, why did you feel so uncomfortable? Well, I was wondering if he had anything to do with Wronski taking that stuff, and because none of it's my business. Boy, she was starting to sound like her mother. So you don't know Mr. Hamilton well, the principal said. I only met him yesterday. He lives next door to Katie Langston, and she made him pick me up this morning. Her eyes moved to the detective. He seemed to be in her corner. It freaked me out a little because Dr. Vronsky said one of the co-captains of the team had something to do with it. And she shrugged. He's a co-captain of the team. The detective handed her his card. If you hear anything that might be helpful for my investigation, please call me. My home number is on the back. She turned it over. There it was. But Dr. Whitaker said none of the drugs are illegal. But trying to break someone's neck is, the detective said. The more we understand about what happened, the more likely we can prevent it from happening again. And cheating violates the charter of this school, Dr. Mullen said, clearly upset, as walked over to his desk. Brighton High doesn't cheat, on or off the field. Never. Cynthia and the detective looked at each other. I want you back in class, he said, scribbling a pass. And I would appreciate it if you kept this discussion to yourself. If you feel compelled to tell your parents, I understand. He ripped the pass out of the book. But I prefer everything remain confidential while Detective Fiducia is conducting the investigation. He handed the pass to her, for which she thanked him. If you should come into any information that could prove helpful, Cynthia, don't come to me. You call Detective Fiducia. Is that clear? Yes, sir. All exchanges of information should happen outside these walls. Yes, sir. Get to class. Cynthia waved goodbye to Detective Fiducia, and outside Dr. Mullen's office, she tucked his card into the secret compartment of her purse. She picked up her books and was heading out when Dr. Eagleton came flying around the corner, nearly knocking her to the ground. He didn't say excuse me or anything, only firmly grasped her arms to quickly move her to the side and broke into a near run toward the front doors of the school. Ugh, the many spinning plates of Brighton High, Cynthia thought. Uh-oh. Which locker did she put her stuff in yesterday? Uh-oh, which was it? 631, 632. Okay, she'd figure it out after Spanish. In the meantime, she needed to plot a route to reach B-Wing because homeroom was over and she would not go through that intersection. She cut through the smoking area, waved to a couple of kids, and kept walking. She wasn't even sure she could get into the building at the end of B-Wing from the outside. But then she saw someone coming outdoor on the end. Why, if it isn't my old friend Not Fred, she called. Please don't close the door in case it locks. Oh, it locks, he said. It's only supposed to be a fire escape. She jogged a couple of steps and took the door from him. Thanks. Got a cigarette? He asked. Yeah, hang on. She opened her purse to get one out and handed it to him. Thanks, he said, walking away. He didn't look back. So much for her new friend. Cynthia went into Senora Cordova's class with a smile. She had already decided she liked this lady. She had pizzazz and clearly wanted to be here with them, trying to teach them something. She was wearing a very conservatively cut dress, the kind her mother might wear to church, but it was bright red, red as the flag of Russia. She couldn't be mourning Khrushchev, could she? But then when she finished taking attendance, Senora Cordova put her book down and Cynthia saw her red, white, and blue scarf. So clearly she must have had the same thought. Someone might think she was rooting for Russia. Golly, her shoes were the same color red too, with spike heels. She really wasn't so tall. She just seemed larger than life. Anyway, Cynthia liked her. Senora Cordova surveyed the class, smiling that brilliant smile. Then she asked, ¿Dónde está el señor Seaton? Yo sabe, Senor Homeworko? Everyone laughed, and just at that moment, Clay came in. Even when he walked, he was graceful, effortlessly gliding along as the fine athlete he was, carrying his books tight under his arm, as though he were protecting a football. She wondered what position he played on the team. Lo siento, he mumbled, sliding into a seat. Ah, en español. Bravo, Senor Seaton. Bienvenido. Welcome. Outside, Cynthia could see the smoking area was filling up. Not everybody was smoking. Everybody was talking, though. Kids were drinking coffee or tea out of styrofoam cups or orange juice out of small cartons. There were a lot of buttered rolls out there, too. They must be good. An overweight black lab was sauntering in from the soccer field. She wondered whose dog it was. It wasn't nice out, though. The sky was overcast, and it was hot, and it was humid. She wondered if Clay knew anything about steroids. He had rolled up the sleeves of his striped Oxford shirt, but his arms didn't look like Teddy's. They were about the same height, though. 5'11", maybe? She was somewhat startled when Clay took something out of his back pocket that turned out to be a leather-covered hard case for eyeglasses. He wore glasses. He wore bifocals. Well, who knew? So he did have one physical drawback, which she actually found rather reassuring. She still couldn't figure out why he asked her out, because he didn't even know her. Maybe it was the dress. Yes, it was probably the dress. She'd probably ask herself out the way she looked in this dress. She thought about what happened in the principal's office. Dr. Whitaker had said something about Dr. Mullen having his work cut out for him last night. She still wasn't clear on what anyone could do if steroids were legal. If anything, she was tempted to use the information on Detective Fiducia's card to make anonymous tips about L. Klumacher, Lester the Molester. Her next class was chemistry in A-Wing. How was she going to get there? And she needed to find that locker in C-Wing to get her economics book and her geometry book so she could do her homework in study hall after. Well, she'd just have to go all the way around outside. I wonder if... No, forget it. She was never doing that intersection again, period. She didn't care if she was late to every class for the rest of her life. She and Clay spoke briefly after Spanish, and then she went on her way to the fire door. No one else was going that way in B-Wing. She didn't hear an alarm go off when not Fred came outside. She pushed the door open. Nothing. She went down the few stairs, took a breath at the outer door, and pushed it open. Yay! Nothing! She quickly walked out the door, across the lawn, and through the smoking area, past the library. She didn't have time to have a cigarette. She waved hi to a few kids, took a wide circle around Marianne Corbett, crossed the hall inside, and passed right on through the door on the other side and headed down the path to C-Wing. She thought it was locker 562, but it wasn't. Someone else's lock was there. Was it in another section? She started checking other lockers. Her mother had put a small piece of pink Rubbermaid bath sticker on the back so she could identify it. After her father refused to let her mother adhere these Rubbermaid bath stickers to the bathtub because they could never get them off, he said, without ruining the finish of the tub, and after her mother asked why would they ever want to take them off and lost the battle, she had invented 1,000 ways to use those stickers. She put them on the steps of the folding stairs up to the attic. She used them to screw off the tops of jars. She stuck them on the bottom of Ashette's food and water bowls. She lined her father's workbench shelves where he kept his glass jars of nails and screws and stuff. Cynthia was getting jostled around in the hall by all the kids who could get into their lockers, so she finally said to heck with it and headed back outside and cut across the student parking lot to enter the far end of A-Wing. The bell signaling the start of class rang. She scooted into the classroom and paused in the doorway as she and Mr. White lab coat from yesterday locked eyes with each other. Then she headed for the first vacant desk. According to her schedule, Dr. Labcoat's name was D. Flugler. She looked around to see who else was in here she knew. Betsy was across the room in the front row, and there were a couple of other kids. There were also juniors in here. It was a big class. D. Flugler Labcoat was writing on and on across the chalkboard. Oh boy, she better pay attention. There were a lot of numbers going on here. She took some notes because everyone else was taking notes. Clearly, this was going to be one of those classes that built directly on the class held before it. She just kept writing down stuff when everyone else did and hoped the book would make sense of it for her tonight. Mr. Flugler said they needed to pick a lab partner. Betsy was looking in her direction, but there was no way. Betsy's handwriting was perfect. She could sketch, too, and all in all, she would make Cynthia pale in comparison. No, she needed somebody smart, but with cruddy handwriting. She turned around. It was Peter Cully, whom she had known since grade school. His oldest brother had been killed in Vietnam, which had been just awful. Pete was quieter now, but was a really good guy. Want to? He asked. Sure. Great. Thanks. Good. She made a note to bring in that notebook of graph paper. After class, Cynthia went over to ask Betsy how she was feeling. On the way, she noticed she had lost quite a bit of weight this summer. Are you feeling a little better? Cynthia asked her. Betsy acted as if she had no idea what Cynthia was talking about and walked away. Just walked away. Okay, whatever. She went up to Mr. Flugler's desk and signed out a textbook. It was a monster. How's your friend? He asked her. He had a concussion, a cracked rib, and a bruised kidney. He looked surprised. And he still came outside to fight? He watched her fill in her name on the form, murmuring, "Kid like that needs to watch out for the draft board." Cynthia's head jerked up. What? He asked. Peter Cully's brother died in Vietnam, she whispered. Which student? Cully, she whispered. The boy in the pink shirt. Mr. Flugler sighed. Filthy war. His eyes came over to her. Thank you for letting me know. The chemistry book was a monster, and she hauled it with her over to C Wing to look for that locker. She could have sworn it was locker 562. Her lock had to be on one of these lockers somewhere. She needed those books to do her homework. The bell rang and she gave up. Maybe she could find someone in study hall who had the books. No such luck. Bummer. And the coffee window in the senior commons was closed, too. So she went outside to smoke a cigarette, but she didn't talk to anyone. The tingles from Clay had worn off. She wanted to call Evan to see how he was. She went to the payphone outside administration, fished a dime out of her purse, and called his number. No answer, which was odd. Unless Evan's mother was out and he was asleep or something. She hung up and stuck her finger in the change thing to get her dime, and found 2. Yes! She went back to C Wing to look for her books. Mr. Bojansky Bojangles strolled by, carrying a brown paper bag. I never got my locker assignment, she told him. Yes, you're a very popular girl in the front office, it would seem. He squinted. You sure everything's okay? Well, no, because I could have sworn I put my economics book in locker 562, but I can't find it. He smiled. So it's your textbook that was returned to me. Her heart soared. It was turned in? That was someone else's locker. So they cut your lock off yesterday. Uh-oh, there went her lock. Now she's going to have to carry all these freaking books around all day. I have the book inside. Come on. He led her inside to his desk, where he took it out of one of the drawers. So you haven't done the reading? I was going to do it now because I have study hall. Okay. So why don't you sit down over there and do it while I eat my sandwich? Okay, thanks. She moved over a few desks to give him some privacy and started reading. Oh boy, was this class going to be a snoozer. Mr. Bojansky, you don't happen to have a geometry book too, do you? He held up a hand while he finished chewing and swallowed. Afraid not. The janitor probably turned it into the math department. She turned her eyes to the book and briefly wondered if she could bring out Rosemary's Baby behind it so she could finish it. Better not. Maybe in class today she should ask Mr. Bojansky about President Nixon's price controls, so she had something, quote, intelligent to say to her father tonight. That was so nice of him to give her that $10 this morning. She checked her purse. Good. She still had it. It was folded up with Detective Fiducia's card in her secret compartment, along with the few mushed-up cigarettes she had left. Good thing she was babysitting tomorrow. She was going to have to buy some soon. When the bell rang, Cynthia thanked Mr. Bojanski and asked him where the math department was. He said it was just past the intersection in A Wing. She thanked him, thinking, forget that. Then Mr. Bojanski called to her again and walked a piece of paper over to her. This is your locker number. 526. That was weird. She had used locker 562 yesterday and wondered if 526 being assigned to her meant anything. Maybe she was clairvoyant. Wouldn't that be great? Her locker was all the way down near the doors to the outside. She had to get a lock from somewhere and somewhere soon. She stepped outside for a minute to get some air and see what she could see. This place is too big, she thought, looking at all the students. Then she watched one kid climb into his car and drive away. Just like that. Wouldn't that be great? To just get in your car and leave. And no one stopped him. We're going to McDonald's. Want to come? Not Fred asked as he walked by. He pointed to a station wagon full of kids in the parking lot. Oh, I can't, she said, but thanks. A girl she didn't know was behind the wheel. Another girl and a guy were in the front seat, too. 2 boys were in the back seat, but not Fred chose to ride hunched over by himself in the cargo area. She smiled. It was a car full of kids, and it sure looked fun. She walked back inside. She was actually looking forward to this class, Vision of Teenagers in American Literature. She'd been shut out of the class and had left her name on a waiting list just in case. And then in July, she got a note in the mail saying that she was in. Golly, it was hot in here. The teacher was opening the windows. He had rolled up his sleeves and loosened his tie. He was very young and very short, but nice-looking, with a good head of hair, fashionably cut. Mr. Lucas. She was the only sophomore in the class. They were reading Catcher in the Rye, Lord of the Flies, and The Outsiders, the last, which Mr. Lucas said was relatively new and was what they were going to read first. She signed out a copy. It looked interesting. Actually, it looked like it was too young for them. Next period, she had lunch, so she left C Wing and walked up the path. While she was in the area, she tried calling Evan's house again, but there still was no answer. As she hung up, she felt a hand encircle her arm. She turned around and looked up at Teddy Hamilton, who released her arm to reach past her to retrieve her dime. He handed it to her. Thanks. I was just wondering, why did you ask me about Ronsky this morning? She didn't even blink in hesitation. Because it was my boyfriend he blindsided in the hall. His eyebrows went up. You have a boyfriend? He said it in a strange way. Well, sort of, she told him. Anyway, I just wondered, since you're a captain and everything, I wanted to know what you thought about what happened. I thought it was psycho, he said flat out, squinting at her. What else could I think? Ronsky obviously has something wrong with him. She wanted to ask him what he thought that was, but thought, back off, don't get involved, just stop. A friendly giant with a crew cut appeared on the stairs. Are we going or not? He asked Teddy. Yeah, but where's Sharky? I'm right here, another big guy called, coming to the base of the stairs. Teddy turned to her. We're going to McDonald's. Want to come? She thanked him but said no, she had homework to do. He said he'd see her around then, went down the stairs and left out the side door with his friends. One of these days she was going to McDonald's too. At least ride in a station wagon full of kids and have some fun. She went into the cafeteria, though, dutifully bought herself a tuna fish sandwich and a carton of milk and sat down to eat. But then she saw a geometry book walking by. She jumped up, talked the kid into stopping for 5 minutes so she could at least see what the assignment had been like. She gobbled her sandwich, drank her milk, and went all the way around outside again to reach economics, where she did ask her question about President Nixon's price controls. But Mr. Bojanski's answer went on so long about some conference in New Hampshire after World War II to establish policies to prevent another depression fixing exchange rates for a world monetary system, major countries fixing their currency to the U.S. dollar, which would be stabilized by a base cost of gold at $35 an ounce. After that, she tuned out. She wasn't sure by the end of his answer if even he was listening to himself, because he kept making notes and then went back and drew big question marks next to his notes. They escaped without a homework assignment. Cynthia was first to arrive in geometry across the hall and took a seat in the back. Robbie came in and sat down next to her. She said hi, but he only fussed with his notebook, his usual behavior that she was accustomed to. When Coach Griffin came in, she went up to ask if someone had turned a textbook in, and he said yes, but it was in the math office, so he gave her another one. Then he said, "It was quite a day yesterday, wasn't it?" She agreed, and as she was walking away, he called her back to ask how long had Principal Mullen stayed at the Whitakers. She told him she thought it had been around 9 or 10 and returned to her seat. Katie came in then, smiled at Cynthia, and started in her direction, but then she saw Robbie, veered sharply around, and headed back to the front row to the far right. What was that about? Then Annabelle came in and almost did exactly the same thing. She smiled at Cynthia, tossing her head back as she always did to show her beautiful hair to advantage, and headed her way. Then her eyes moved to Robbie, momentarily froze. Then she spotted Katie and backtracked to sit down at the desk behind her. Robbie was oblivious. "I think I would be more interested in geometry," Cynthia said, opening her book, "if I could build the Great Pyramids of Egypt." "Start with designing a cabin," Robbie said, surprising her. "Then you could build it. It's fun." She looked at him. "Have you done that?" "Uh-huh. In Vermont. My dad uses it for hunting." "Wow. Built it. And your dad hunts?" He nodded. "Most guys from the South do. Cynthia's father didn't. He could be pretty rough and gruff, but almost always lost it where hurt or dead animals were concerned. Her mother said it was one of the things she loved most about him. She almost asked Robbie if he hunted, but decided she didn't want to know. The bell rang, and Coach Griffin went straight into it. He was pretty good at explaining things, and Cynthia thought she might come to like geometry. That is, if everything came out right. There seemed to be an inordinate number of ways to mess everything up along the way in these formulas. The kid next to her touched her on the arm and passed her a note. Cynthia sat back in her chair and opened it behind the desk. It was from Katie. At least she assumed it was from Katie because it wasn't Annabelle's handwriting. "I'm ducking Robbie. He called me last night to ask me to the movies. When I said no, he bit my head off. Why not? I told him I didn't have to give him a reason. I'm new and need to get settled. He hung up on me." "Give me the note," Coach Griffin said. He was standing right behind her. It was pointless to say what note since he was looking at it. He moved around to the side of her desk and held out his hand. Cynthia swallowed. Did she dare? She must. What if he read it out loud? She tore the note in half one way, then tore it the other way, twisted all to pieces, then balled it all up between the palms of her hands. "It's private," she explained, handing it over. "Then don't write notes in class." He turned and let the ball of paper fly across the room in an arc. It landed squarely in the center of the wastepaper basket, and everybody clapped. After class, Katie was waiting for her in the hall. Thank you, she said. "That's why I'm not so big about notes anymore," Cynthia explained. They were moving towards the doors. "Remember when?" Annabelle started. "Please don't," Cynthia said. But of course Annabelle did, telling Katie about the time Mrs. Raga had read a note she had written out loud, which called Mrs. Raga names and made the teacher burst into tears. It was one of the worst things she had ever done. Of course, she had been in second grade, and her vocabulary had been very limited. That note, quote, "Mrs. Raga is a fat, ugly witch," had prompted her to cry too, particularly when she was taken to the principal's office. She heard Annabelle telling Katie all of this as they moved outside, ended with Cynthia writing a poem for Mrs. Raga, begging her forgiveness, and gave her a box of chocolates on top of that. And now she was still Mrs. Raga's favorite student. Listen, you guys, Katie said, I've got to meet Teddy. She started backing away. Annabelle, should I just bring my bag to school tomorrow? Sure. Then we can just take the bus to my house after school. Okay. Bye. See you guys. She's spending the night tomorrow, Annabelle said matter-of-factly. She looked down at all the books in Cynthia's arms. You can't walk downtown with all of those. Tell me about it, Cynthia said. That chemistry book looks lethal. Leave that one in your locker. But I don't have a lock. Who is going to steal that thing? Annabelle wanted to know. Maybe some kid behind the Iron Curtain, but no one living on this side. Cynthia did not think that was true at all, but it was the heaviest book. Maybe she could come in a little earlier tomorrow and do her chemistry homework. She didn't want to be a bad partner for Peter. I'll be right back, she promised, and ran inside to leave the chemistry and economics book in her locker without a lock. They set out for downtown and weren't even off campus before the big red Impala pulled over. Impressed I got it fixed so fast? Jocko asked Cynthia, easing to a stop. She smiled a little. It's Annabelle, right? He asked, snapping his fingers and pointing at her. Yeah. You girls want to ride to wherever you're going? Gosh, yes, Annabelle said immediately, running over to the car. How could girls ever think this was a good idea? Still, it was hot and downtown seemed very far away. Annabelle had the car door open and was holding the seat forward, waiting for Cynthia to get in the back. Cynthia didn't see any seatbelts, but she got in. Annabelle plunked herself down in the front seat and slammed the door closed. We're going downtown to the music box, she said happily. Okay, Jocko said, pulling out. We're getting the new John Lennon album. Jocko shrugged. Not my speed. The Dead is my group. Of course it is, Cynthia thought. A band of mixed-up music for mixed-up kids. One big collision of rock and blues and folk and gospel, even reggae, and LSD. Not exactly the type for Carole King, was he? She hoped Jocko had not taken any LSD today. She let Annabelle do all the talking and sat directly behind Jocko so he couldn't look at her. Annabelle was having a lovely time, but that was Annabelle. As long as something was happening, she was happy and into it. The store was in Good River Shopping Center, just behind the post road. Joppo dropped them off in front of the record store, the whole front window of which was filled with a gigantic poster of John, with headphones on, playing on a white grand piano. Stamped in red on the upper right corner, it said, "It's here!" There were a lot of kids inside, a couple they knew. The doors to the sound booth were open in the back, where customers normally could go and listen to records before buying them, and the John Lennon album was playing. They had 3 entire wood bins of Imagine out on the floor, and had moved in next to it bins of Paul McCartney's Ram, that had come out in spring, George Harrison's triple album, All Things Must Pass, which Cynthia received for her birthday, and Ringo's weird country music record, Beaucoup of Blues, which Cynthia didn't understand and didn't want to. Behind those bins, they had wooden dowels stacked with 45s. They selected their albums and walked up to the register. They still had the July Rolling Stone out on the counter, which Cynthia had looked through weeks ago at the club. Very handsome face of Jim Morrison of The Doors was on the cover because he had died. Of what? No one knew, but heroin was suspected. Ah, heroin, Cynthia thought. They knew for sure it was an overdose of heroin that killed Janis Joplin last fall. She couldn't remember what kind of drug it was that killed Jimi Hendrix. Sleeping pills, maybe? Morrison, Joplin, Hendrix. They were calling them the 27 Club because that's how old they all were when they died. Drugs. How stupid. She'd never take them, ever. When does the new issue of Rolling Stone come out? She asked the clerk. Next week, but it could come in on Saturday. Sometimes they do. Cynthia got a separate plastic bag for each album and waited for Annabelle to pay for hers. They discussed whether it was too hot for pizza and decided it was never too hot for pizza, and left the shopping center, walking the connector road back to the post road, turning left under the railroad bridge, and then left again, heading into Town Pizzeria, where they each ordered a slice. The guys stuck them in the oven. The girls paid for them and sat down. Annabelle opened her album. Oh, look. How cool is this? She asked, unfolding the poster that was inside. It was the poster of John playing the white grand piano. Very cool. What is the Oh No Plastic Band anyway? Cynthia asked. It's a changing group of artists who work on John and Yoko's different creative projects, she answered. The people who work on this album may or may not work on their films or their drawings or their paintings and stuff. Musicians and concerts were Annabelle's thing. She had obtained tickets through her father to an Allman Brothers concert at the Capitol Theater in Portchester and took Cynthia. It had been her very first concert, and she really liked it. They went up to get their slices, and Cynthia watched as Annabelle used a bunch of napkins to soak up the excess olive oil. It seemed like a good idea, but Annabelle had used up all the napkins, so Cynthia went back up to the counter to get some more out of the holder. What are you doing using up all my napkins? The pizza man fussed. You could go home and eat ketchup on bread. Sorry. Cynthia hated situations like this. She had the napkins in her hand, so it wasn't like she could put them back. Annabelle, in the meantime, was thoroughly enjoying her pizza. Do you want me to give you some money? She asked him. He looked at her for a moment and then exploded into laughter. Ha, 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 a teenager wants to pay me more money. Ha, ha, ha. Then he waved her away and went back to his work. What was that about? Annabelle asked when she returned to the table. He was ticked at us for using so many napkins. She blotted the excess oil off her slice. Isn't that Richie's dad? Annabelle asked, her eyes on the window. Cynthia turned to look. Oh, it was Richie's dad, Mr. Tenter. Sometimes Cynthia saw him hurrying along East End Avenue toward downtown in overalls and a work shirt with a big smile on his face, but sometimes she saw him staggering in the other direction, clearly drunk. Richie's mother worked as a receptionist at Cynthia's dentist's office. One time she overheard Mrs. Tenter say, "No, we're dead flat broke," and slammed the phone. Cynthia had never heard that expression before. Cynthia turned back around, said yes, and bit into her pizza. Oh, it was so good. Annabelle lowered her head. He's an alcoholic, isn't he? Cynthia nodded, continuing to eat. He's going to Borgnine's next door. Borgnine's was the bar with dark windows you couldn't see through. In the evenings, commuters could be seen running in there in pairs to have a quick, friendly drink before going home. But during the day, the patrons could be a little scary. When it was hot, like today, they propped the door open, so if she and Annabelle were to turn right out the door, they would see the men huddled over the bar on their stools, nursing drinks and smoking cigarettes, blinking against the daylight if they looked in their direction. And if Annabelle and Cynthia were to walk past, they would all hold a hand over their eyes and look in their direction and try to sound friendly. Mr. Tenter was never like that, though, but he never seemed to be quite sure of where he was. You might say hello, and he might suddenly crouch and pivot, looking behind him, and then to the sides, before straightening up and saying hi back. Mr. Gagliardi had completed his apprenticeship under a plumber who worked for Mr. Tenter at his company, Tenter Construction, and said it had been a very successful business. Mr. Tenter drank it all away. It was almost 4:00. Cynthia needed to get going. She and Annabelle crossed the post road together and then split up, each heading in the direction of their homes. Cynthia's was only about a mile away, but Annabelle's was at least 2. She was not far up East Avenue when there was the sound of squealing brakes, and Jocko cruised to a stop next to her. Come on, Cynthia. I'll take you home. It's too hot to walk. It was too hot to walk, but this thing with Jocko needed to stop. I don't think so, Jocko. I mean, thanks, but I don't think it's a good idea. Why? Cars were passing and mothers were peering closely at them on their way by. Because I like you as a friend. Yeah, so? He was staring at her chest. So I'm going out with Evan Whitaker, she said, turning to walk away. He squealed his way up next to her again. Yeah, so? So I'm going to walk, Jocko. See ya. She picked up her pace. The car rolled up beside her again. You're an arrogant bitch, you know that? Yeah, I know, she said, keeping her eyes straight ahead. Fine, walk for the rest of your life. I don't friggin' care. Then he zoomed off, leaving her in a cloud of exhaust. What a jerk. Her feet were killing her. These shoes were too small. It was slightly better when she started cutting through people's yards to reach the old wood bridge that crossed the river, but now could only be used by pedestrians. She was almost home. She entered the woods her parents had added on to their property, and when she emerged on their back lawn, noticed the stupid weeds had all grown up again, so she needed to pull those soon. That was one of her jobs. Weeding. Blech. She took off her shoes and peds off, and the grass felt soft and cool under her feet. Ashette started barking even before she climbed the terrace steps. She went in through the kitchen door, yelled, "Hi, I'm home," and was just in time to see Ashette's rear end disappear around the doorway into the den. Now she would race through the den, through the living room, through the dining room, across the foyer, and then down the hall back into the kitchen. That was her routine. Cynthia dumped all her stuff on the counter in time to squat down to greet her. Who's the best doggy in the whole wide world? She asked, rubbing her all over. Is it you? She asked, kissing her wet nose and standing up. Mom? She peeked out the window. The door on her mother's side of the garage was open, so she might be out. She picked up one of the music box bags and headed upstairs. Memes? Cynthia? Hi. Oh, phew, it was hot. She needed to change before going to Evan's. Mimi was still in a nightgown, sitting cross-legged on the bed in the guest room, lying back against the pillows. If it was possible, her face looked even worse, sort of black and yellow. Here's your get well present, Cynthia announced, handing her the bag. What is it? She looked inside and frowned. But I told you, my dad already got it for me. That was before my father told me if I was buying Evan an album, then I should buy you an album too. And since I couldn't tell him I saw you last night, I said I didn't have enough money to. She fell across the bed. Then he offered to pay for most of it. So it's really a present mostly from my dad, although I paid some. Mimi was quiet, touching the album. Go on, open it. There's a really cool poster inside. You can use the record player in my room to listen to it while I go over to Evan's. Where's my mom? She went to get ice cream because she and your father gave it all to me last night. She looked up. Look, Cynthia, I'm sorry, but the cat is out of the bag. Your mother blew the whole caper wide open. What caper? She asked, sitting up. What are you talking about? She knows all about us watching Dick Cavett last night. How? Well, I was watching this James Cagney movie in the den, and then your mom came in and started giving me the third degree. What is a glass and a 7-Up bottle doing in the front hall closet? Mimi, do you know? I said we were really, really tired. Mimi put her hands on her hips in a pretty good imitation of her mother. Do you mean to tell me you girls were up last night after Mr. Schuyler and I went to bed? Mimi rolled her eyes, and I said, well, sorta. And the next thing I knew, I'd spilled everything. I'm so sorry. But you didn't tell her that your father's bringing the album home from California, did you? She knew already because she was standing right there when he told me about it. Oops. So now her mother she knew Mr. Watson was bringing the album home for Mimi and that she had not said anything to her father when he said this morning, shouldn't Mimi get the album too? And then she took $10 from him. That didn't look so good. She heard a car turn into the driveway and assumed it was her mother. She probably wouldn't let her go over to Evan's now. Don't worry about it, Memes, she said, rolling off the bed. It's not your fault. The doorbell rang. Don't answer it, Mimi said immediately. I have to. I live here. She went downstairs, and just as she looked out one of the side light windows, she was thinking maybe she shouldn't in case it was someone she didn't want to see, like Jocko. Well, he'd seen her. She opened the door. I'm sorry about what I said, he blurted immediately, but I was mad. She was tempted to tell him to stop using oil on his hair, that he needed to shave, stop looking at her boobs, and then slam the door in his face. When did he get so tall? She was on a stair higher than he, and he was her height. Thank you for apologizing, she said. I don't just want to be your friend, he said, looking down at the ground. But if that's how it is, then I guess that's how it is. His eyes came up. I can be friends. I'd like that, she told him, and held out her hand. He took it, they shook, and then he practically ran down the stairs. She closed the door. Was that Jocko? Mimi whispered from the top of the stairs. Yeah. Did he come to see how I was? Cynthia thought a second and then decided on, he stopped in to apologize. Well, that was very nice of him. It really wasn't his fault. And it was a good thing he didn't hit the bus. Cynthia, you're home, her mother called. Yes. Her mother appeared. Imagine my bewilderment after you left for school this morning and found Ashette drinking 7-Up in the front hall closet. Cynthia tried to read the signals in the wind. Was she truly mad, or was she succumbed to her own sense of humor? Ashette drinking a 7-Up won out, and her mother laughed, shaking her head. It was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in all my life. So, of course, I knew you had something to do with it. I'm sorry, Mrs. Schuyler. It was my 7-Up. Fortunately, Ashette seems no worse for wear. I called the vet to make sure we hadn't poisoned her. Dr. Archer said next time we should make it a fresca so we don't rush her into diabetes any faster than we already are. She rubbed her face and dropped her hands. I'm not going to tell your father about, well, any of it. It's not worth it. Not even about you skimming him for $10. Rotten kid. Ashette came waddling in to see what was going on, her tail going a mile a minute. Can I still take Evan his album? She caught herself. May I take Evan's album to him? Yes, you may. In fact, I'll drive you because I want to pick up a pizza for dinner. Why don't you call over there and see if it's a good time? Cynthia went into her parents' bedroom, to her mother's side of the bed, to use the phone. No answer. She was getting tired of this. Her mother said to bring a paper and pencil so if there still wasn't anyone home when they got there, they could leave a note and the record in between the screen door and the front door. When they were alone in the car, her mother asked her whose, quote, interesting car had that been in the driveway when she came home. Cynthia said it was the guy who had been driving a car in the accident yesterday. That's nice. He came in to check on Mimi. Basically, she said. No one was home at the Whitakers. In fact, neither car was there. I know you're disappointed, sweetie, but maybe it's just as well Evan isn't here. You really should get started on your homework because heaven knows you need to go to bed early and get some sleep tonight. Cynthia fell asleep in the car on the way home. Her mother apparently just left her there because the next thing she knew, her father was looking in at her through the window. Did you get the records? He asked, smiling. In terms of emotion, this smile expressed unbridled excitement in her father. She nodded, yawning and stretching. He held the door open for her and followed her inside as she explained about leaving the album at the Whitakers, but saying that Mimi was thrilled about her present and wanted to personally thank him. They heard Ashette barking her head off as she went racing by on her route through the den. The pizza box was sitting there on the counter, but there was no Mom. Her father put down his briefcase. "Liz?" Mimi came down the hall. "Mrs. Schuyler's on the phone upstairs. I think it's really, really serious." "Serious about what?" her father asked, already on his way upstairs. "Evan had some kind of seizure today," Mimi told Cynthia. "Oh, no. Oh, Cynthia. Now what?" "Well, I guess we'll just have to come back next week to find out what on earth is going on." Thank you, everybody, for joining me today. I hope you had fun. I certainly did. I always do. I know that baby boomers are shy about rating anything or leaving comments on any kind of social anything. But if you feel so inclined, you are allowed to rate this show wherever you get your podcasts from and or leave a comment. I want you to have an absolutely fantastic week. Remember, we don't drink and drive anymore. Ever. Take care, everybody.